Hey, I know if I could have everybody stand up for a second and just stretch. It's been a long day. We're getting to coffee soon. It's an old teacher trick to get you guys to pay attention. Great. And meet people near you if you don't know each other yet. All right, so I've got 20 minutes to get through all of my slides. And if I do it quickly, I think I might have time for one question. So I'm going to just jump through really, really quickly. First thing, I want to let you know I'm an entrepreneur. I like to say that I am you guys can sit down again. That's good. So I call myself a recovering entrepreneur. I've done it 5 times. I've had 4 failures and 1 success. My last one was successful. And I exited out of my company and went back to the university, and now I teach entrepreneurship. So I like to tell people that I help others not make the same mistakes that I made as an entrepreneur. So I've been on both the education side and the entrepreneurship side. And I go around the world and I talk to people about innovation and how people can be more innovative. And what's funny is I always get that look from people going, is innovation or entrepreneurship even something that you can teach? Is that even teachable? And I always turn it back on them as a teacher. I always say, well, I think that's the wrong question to ask. It's not a matter of whether you can teach it. It's a matter of whether you can learn it. It's like multivariable calculus. Not everybody can learn it, but it doesn't mean you can't teach it, right? Someone doesn't agree with me? So I'm going to change gears a little bit on this to highlight what I'm talking about. How many of you are familiar with this animal? What animal is this? It's a crow. It's a crow. And a raven, same family. Do you guys know what crows are famous for? Stealing. Okay. What? Solving problems. Yes, stealing requires intelligence, and solving problems does as well. It turns out that crows are one of the most intelligent animals on the planet. In fact, they're so intelligent we've had to rewrite biology books. They're almost as smart as primates. And one of the measures, in fact, they are very smart. They know how to solve problems. They know how to use tools. They have been observed using tools to get food out of crevices. But what's more fascinating is that they've been observed making tools. Now, if you see this experiment here, you might not get a good view, but there's this clear box that has food in it. And he cannot reach it with its beak. He sees that there's a long stick in this contraption. If he can get to that, the long stick can pull the food out, but he can't reach that unless he takes that little stick on the string, pulls that off, bends it, right? And then pulls the long stick out and uses that long stick to get the food out. Now, it's so complicated, I probably lost you trying to describe what it has to do. And a crow can do that without ever being taught to do it, okay? It knows how to make a tool. And I tell this story because I have students back home at Berkeley who cannot do this. As smart as they are, they cannot make their own tools. And the reason why is for their entire careers, we have been giving them every tool that they need to get an A in class. Every formula, every instruction set, everything that they need to know, every fact. And then we figure out whether they remembered everything, and we test them for their recall. Not for how much they understand about this stuff, but how much they remember. And this is what we call deductive education, okay? The problem with all of this is that we're actually inductive learners. We don't learn through just rules and understanding and memorizing. If you have a 5-year-old kid around, some of you guys have brothers and sisters and children, what is a 5-year-old's favorite question? Why? And when you answer that question, why, what happens next? Another why. And then when you answer that, what happens next? Another why. Until you start questioning why you have a 5-year-old kid, right? But this is how children wire their brains. They look at something and they want to know why, okay? This is how our brains actually function. It looks at a result and it looks for the reason why. And this is what entrepreneurs do, actually. They're always looking for the reason why. Why is this so slow? Why isn't this better? Why isn't this efficient? And they find ways to solve that. So I think you guys can see where I'm going with this story. Now, okay, so full disclosure, this is not a picture of me. I was this cute as a child, trust me, but I was what they call a very healthy eater, and so I was about 3 times the size of this child when I was little. And then what I've learned is that I never put personal pictures in my presentations because I always have students who end up putting it on Facebook. So I've learned. So this is going to be my stand-in. Trust me, I was this cute. All right, I was born in Korea, and I came to the US when I was 5 because I was adopted by an American family that took me in when I was 5. So I knew Korean fluently until I came to the US, where I literally was the Asian population in my hometown. So I could speak to no one. And I had to learn English inductively. There was no one telling me what the rules were, right? Or the formula to learn English. I had to learn it on my own. And so I learned it quickly, and I went into school, and I did very well in most of the subjects until I hit 3rd grade when I had to learn cause and effect. And cause and effect is pretty simple, right? It's something is the cause, the other is the effect, right? It's a 50-50 shot. Had I flipped the coin, I would get 50% right, but I was getting 100% wrong, right? So my teacher brought my parents in and said, Ken's doing great in everything, but we think he has a learning disability because he's getting cause and effect wrong. We've never seen a student ever get cause and effect wrong, right? So I realized, hey, it's 50%, so I will do what I think is the right answer, and I'll just flip it, and then the teacher will be happy and I'll get my A. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So to this day, I'm going to tell you something very true. I still have to double check cause and effect, right? I've got my left and right, but cause and effect still have to think about. I didn't know what was going on until I took Korean, the language, as a college student. As an undergrad at Berkeley, I discovered what was going on. I had rediscovered this problem. If you know English, and most of you know it really well, this is a typical sentence, right? The sidewalk was wet because it was raining. The cause comes after the word because, and the effect is before. In Korean, the word because is in the middle of the sentence as well, except the cause is before and the effect is after. I had been using the rules that I had known about Korean, and I was applying it to English because no one told me, no one was there to tell me that that was not the way to do it. And it dawned on me as I was thinking back to this, what if the way we've been teaching students, the way we've been teaching you how to be great engineers and great business folks actually is the opposite of what you need to know as an entrepreneur, and you're just applying the wrong rules to the startup world. And let me make this argument. When you're a student, you don't want to look dumb, so you don't raise your hand, you don't call out answers, right? But as a startup, you have to risk being wrong. You just have to, because most likely you are. You'll be wrong until you find a path to being right. In terms of culture, got these slides a little bit off here, you have the culture of perfection, right? As an engineering student, you're taught if you don't get it right, the train crashes and the plane will come flying down from the sky, right? But in startup land, you have to just do what's good enough. Because if you wait for perfection, Google will kill you. It's the rule of the valley is if you wait too long, their army of engineers will beat you to it. And it's not just startups that are feeling this. All of the automakers, trust me, BMW, Mercedes, they're all worried about Google because Google is going to digitize the car, right? So another one is you are expected to know the answer as a student. All the smart students seem to know the answer before the professor asks the question, right? But in startup land, you have to ask for help. You have to go out and find mentors. You have to find people who have done this before. And the list goes on. As a student, you're tested individually. In a startup, it doesn't matter if your code compiles, if your partner can't sell it. You sink or swim together. There is no individual grades. Everyone is a competitor in a student environment. Curved classes in the US where there can be only one A+ make students compete with each other. They don't want to share answers. They don't want to share notes. They don't want to collaborate. But in a startup, everyone is a resource, including your competitors. I had the cell phone numbers of every one of my competitors in my phone, and we used to talk maybe twice a year to compare notes to see how we were doing against Google, right? This is a common thing in the Valley. And so this student mentality of zero sum is the exact opposite of what you need in a startup culture, right? And the last one I want to point out is you are encouraged to follow the professor as a student. But in a startup, you're expected to lead. Now, if we constantly teach you to listen to us exactly and to follow us, how can we expect you to lead society into the future? So what I'm proposing here is that the way we've been educating everyone, not just in the US, but I imagine here, I know this is the case in Germany, in France, South America, is we've been teaching the brightest students to fundamentally not be ready to start companies. Because we have been putting you, ironically, in an environment like this, to listen to people like me, right? And we teach you about what goes into a startup, right? How business models work, how products are built. We tell you how other people have done it. But what we need to be doing is training you and giving you the muscle memory of actually doing it yourself. So what we've done at Berkeley is to introduce something called the Berkeley Method, which is completely experiential. We don't have curves. We tell you to go out and collaborate. At the end of the semester, you need to have real working products and businesses. And we don't tell you what to do. We help you become a self-learner. That's what we found, that most entrepreneurs are amazing at teaching themselves, right? Sometimes they're really bad at listening, actually, but they're really good at teaching themselves. And so we guide students to learn how things work, and we help them find ways to apply those lessons. It's really behavior training. This is not about knowledge transfer. This is about training you to make those decisions that you need to make and to let you lead in problem solving. We're just there to ask the right questions, but you have to test out your own hypotheses. And so we've had to change the way we teach and roll it back to the time that you were asking that question why, when you were 5 years old. And so the way that we teach is by using games. Because when you were a child, the way that you learned how to share, how to take turns, how to follow rules, how to break rules, is by playing games, by playing social games that involve puzzles and involve Legos. So it's quite fun to do all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to leave you guys with a story of one of the games that we play. And I teach in Europe every summer. I do a study abroad. And 1 year, 3 years ago, we did a full month in Estonia. It's a tiny country that's famous for Skype. If you guys use Skype, they were the engineers behind Skype. And so I took about 25 Berkeley students to go collaborate and build companies with Estonian students. And if you know anything about Berkeley students, they're very American. So they're very loud. They're very opinionated. If there's 5 Americans in a room, there's 25 opinions. I don't know how the math works, but they're endless opinions, right? They are very friendly, but oftentimes more talking than they are doing. And if you know Estonians, they are exactly the opposite. They rarely talk, they don't smile, but they get things done, and they'll listen to you, but they will only do what they think you're gonna, that makes sense, right? So there's gonna be a culture clash, and I wanted to prepare my students for that. So I had a scavenger hunt where I had the teams of 5, I had 5 teams of 5. 2 stayed in the control room, and the other 3 went out into the field to go do a scavenger hunt. They get little clues, right? And here are the clues here are the instructions. I had to give a few very basic instructions. First, don't do anything illegal or dangerous. You would think this is obvious, but we spent 15 minutes defining illegal or dangerous, which is, again, Berkeley students, they're known to need this education. Second thing is the control room. That part of the team got instructions on a piece of paper. There was no talking from us. We just gave them the instructions. And you could only use your voice on the phone. There was no texting, no email. Think about this generation, your generation. You have never known a world without instant texting or email. So you weren't allowed to use those. And then the kicker is you couldn't use the internet. Of course, your generation has never known a world without internet. This will feel like you're naked. And the kids freaked out. This was the worst one. Who do you ask if you can't ask Google, right? That was one of the questions the student said. So the field team had to go take a picture of themselves where the clue told them to go. And these were clues. They weren't just, hey, go to this location. So it was like, go find the oldest 100-year-old professor on campus and take a selfie. Okay, how many 100-year-old professors are hanging out in the summer? Probably a statue. So they had to go find a statue on campus. So part of it was interpretive, not just, hey, here's an instruction. Now this sounds fun and easy, which the students thought it was, until the clues came and looked like this. How do you describe these things to someone who has never seen it before? Right? The Russian is kind of easy because most of those characters you know, so you can say, hey, that's an H, right? But some characters you don't. Right, that backwards N, right? Because what they would need to do is tell the other team over the phone, hey, here's the letters, go find someone who speaks Russian and have them translate it, right? But Chinese, how do you describe that if the other side has never spoken Chinese? They don't know the characters, right? How do you describe that? The reason this is important is if you're doing a startup, you're most likely doing something no one has ever done before, which means there are no words for it. You have to describe them, what you're doing with the words that you have. This is exactly what you have to do. And we found most students sucked at this. They were yelling at each other on the phone, right? And what was the funniest one was we had a team where a student said, go find a Russian speaker. I know Russian. I'll just say it and the other person can just translate it for you. And my first thought was, well, if you knew Russian, couldn't you just read it? Like why would you need someone to tell you what you read? Sure enough, he'd only taken a semester of Russian, and like a typical American, oh, I know Russian, right? I know the whole language, War and Peace, I read it backwards and forwards in Russian, right? He took one semester, right? And so they went through 3 Estonians who all said, yeah, I speak fluent Russian. And if you know Estonians, they won't claim they know Russian unless they majored in Russian lit, right? Because they never overstate their skills. And each one, after 5 minutes of trying, said, I'm really sorry, but my Russian's really rusty. I can't help you. And had to embarrassingly leave. And the guy kept screaming, he's like, why can't you find a real Russian speaker? And what had happened was he didn't realize, but they had found all 3 were fluent. But they were Estonian, and they couldn't be rude. So rather than say, hey, your Russian is so bad, I can't understand a word you're saying, they said, you know, it's my fault. I'm sorry, I'm not good at it, and left because they didn't want to create an embarrassing scene, right? What this education points out, this is very interesting, is that he, especially, and we use this as an example to the rest of the students, Americans culturally have a problem with overconfidence. I'm sure you all agree. We tend to take people into wars that we can't win. We collapse economies, oops, right? We tend to think all of our companies are going to be successful until they're not. That's the burden that we carry from our culture, is that we tend to think too positively. I think other cultures don't have this problem. It might be the opposite. I go to Eastern Europe and everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, this is too good. I'm waiting for someone to get hit by a truck, right? But this is something that's important. This is a huge lesson, is that entrepreneurship is a cultural experience. This is why you can't transplant this from another country. That's why the Valley just can't be transplanted here, right? It has to be something that bubbles up from the culture that you're in, and one of the major lessons that we teach. And you can't just teach this as lecture like I've done here today, unfortunately, but you have to have students experience it. And so what I would suggest through all of this, and these are the other lessons that come from this game, is that entrepreneurship in some way is a game. It's a great way to teach entrepreneurship, but it's also a great way to teach lots of topics, to train students to lead and to be in charge of their own education. And this is why I argue that every single person should be trained with some entrepreneurial education. It's because you will be faced with choices, your personal choices, your career choices, political choices. And the more that you are trained to make decisions on your own, you will be a better force for your own life, but you'll be a better force for the people around you. And so we need our students to lead in making the changes the world expects from us. So this kind of education hopefully will make them ready. So I hope you will join me. Thank you.